Let's pivot to my reason for you being here is the documentary talking about Dr. King is coming out this week, this documentary, and it's about the life of civil rights icon Andrew Young. It's called The Dirty Work.
Nobody really wanted to go work for Martin Luther King. He had been stabbed, bombed, jailed, and he didn't have any money.
We don't intend to quit this fight until we get our situation resolved.
The last thing we agreed on was we had to take the movement into politics. I've been through many dangers, toils, and snares. If I had to take a few kicks and licks to get a Civil Rights Act, I'd do it any day of the week. That's what I call the dirty work.
You were the executive producer of this documentary. Why him? Why now?
You know, Rev, part of the reason that it's him and now is because he was willing to do it. He's willing to talk about his own experience in a way that he hasn't really done before. He's written about the civil rights movement. He's talked about his time working with Dr. King. But this is kind of the story about what it was like to be kind of the administrator of Dr. King's movement, what it meant to have difficult negotiations with the white business owners who they were trying to move, what it meant to go tell some student groups that were interested in protesting that it wasn't strategic, wasn't a good idea to protest right now. Dr. King didn't want him to do it. How to tell some people, you're in this part of the funeral, you need to move over here. We need you from the back of this line to be in the front of this line. We need you in the front of the line to be in the back. It's not glamorous. He wanted, I think, to talk for the first time about the real one man's experience of doing the day-to-day shoe leather work of being in a movement like this. And I just feel like, he's in a singular position to tell that story. Nobody else can tell us kind of what it was like for him in his own mind and in his own life, what it was happening. But it's a really valuable story right now when millions of Americans are, for example, going to be protesting next week on No King's Day on the 18th, the day after this documentary premieres on MSNBC. There's a very large resistance movement in this country, once again, to very terrible behavior by the government, where the odds are against the resistance movement, if you look at it on paper. But they're on the side of justice, I believe, and it's going to take a lot of discipline, a lot of spiritual grounding, a lot of persistence, and a lot of organizing, and a lot of people changing their lives in order for that movement to succeed. So we need to look at people who've done that, I think, to learn the lessons of their own life.
And it takes strategy. And I think, you know, I grew up mentored by Jesse Jackson, who was on King's Day, and he always said that Andy had a way of talking to everybody, the younger people that thought Dr. King was too old, and Dr. King was killed at 39. The older people that thought it was too far out there. One of the things that strikes me from the documentary and my own experiences is that Andrew was, and probably still is, always working. Look at these pictures of him constantly in action while he works alongside of Dr. King. And even though he did incredibly important work and occupied real positions of power within the government and the private sector, in some ways he's a less visible civil rights leader than some of his peers. Why do you think that is?
I think that's his own choice. I mean, I think he saw himself as a workhorse, not a show horse. And he has led some amazing prayers, and he has made some amazing speeches, and he has stepped to the podium at some really important moments. I think of him, for example, even after the civil rights movement as mayor of Atlanta, after the bombing of the Atlanta Olympics and the moment that he had there. I mean, he has had some moments in the spotlight. Very controversial, very accomplished UN ambassador appointed by Jimmy Carter. He's done all these things. But I think fundamentally he sees himself as a workhorse, as somebody who is a strategist and an organizer and somebody willing to work down to the smallest detail to make sure the project is effectuated, to make sure the goal is achieved. And, you know, movements are not made up of figureheads. You know, movements are not made up of speeches and marches. Movements are made up of mailing lists and of meetings and of phone calls and of difficult closed-door discussions and of hard decisions and people being on the outs and people being on the ends and bridges burned and bridges repaired. And we need to start thinking about ourselves in this moment, in this generation, with this task ahead of us, in terms of what skills we have and how hard we're willing to work, even when it's not glamorous and even when it doesn't immediately pay off.
And even when you don't get the credit, you need a little Andy Young in you.
Yeah, that's right.
Last thing, you and I are going down to Georgia on Tuesday to be at Clark Atlanta University and HBCU for an evening with Andrew Young himself, promoting and talking about your documentary. How are you hoping that we can explain to young college-age generation the importance of the civil rights icon and what lessons we can teach and they can learn from him that we can put into today's movement?
I will tell you honestly, I'm going to draft in your wake a little bit because I think you are better at this than I am. But, you know, one of the editorial decisions we made strategically in the film is that we kept, I mean, Andrew Young is alive. He's 93. He's totally with it. He is shrewd and together and lucid and smart and everything. He's fine. But we kept him off camera in his current state as an older man until the very end of the film. Because when you're watching the film through the whole documentary, you can't believe you're watching something that carries over into our generation, into our lives right now. But he's here now with a story to tell. And we think of the civil rights movement as those, you know, as that monument on the Mall. And we think of that, you know, the iconic speeches, and we think of the Voting Rights Act, and we think of the Civil Rights Act, and we think of these things that are sort of carved in on stone tablets in terms of our moral inheritance as Americans. But the people who made those things happen are flesh and blood. Many of them, including Andy Young, are still among us. And if we are going to achieve big things against odds that are really big, we're going to need to learn from those of them who are the people from that movement who are still with us. And the fact that Ambassador Young is willing to speak about it, I think, is a miracle and a blessing. And I think I'm hoping this film, and speaking to those students with you on Tuesday, is going to be as moving to them as this whole process has been for me. It's really changed my life. This study and this film, making this project, has changed me.
Well, I'm telling you, Andrew Young and others who set my tone for my life, I'm proud to be a part of this with you Tuesday, with John Hope Bryant and others. It's a big, 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 big necessity at this time.
Yeah, it's a big
Rachel
deal.
Maddow, thank you and congratulations on a really good, I got to see it, a really good documentary. It airs on MSNBC Friday at 9 Eastern Time.